A man who can level entire battlefields just transformed into a fat cat, and now a forbidden experiment has put a teenage boy directly in a professor's crosshairs. That professor doesn't care if the kid is innocent. He only cares that there are no witnesses. The boy is already on the ground, broken leg and all, with nowhere to run. And the one person powerful enough to stop this is currently stuck in the body of a chubby ginger cat with zero energy left. What happens when the most feared awakened on the planet can barely climb a chair? Night falls over the city. One of the residential blocks sits quiet until a white flash tears across the sky, a streak like a falling star heading straight for one of the gateways. The explosion lights up the street. At the impact site, a man leans against a stone fence, blood and sweat pouring down his face. The asphalt beneath him is stained dark. He braces himself against the wall and staggers upright, thinking bitterly that Caden, himself, never imagined he'd look this pathetic. But then again, he wouldn't be in this state if those lunatics hadn't jumped him all at once. He glances down the empty street, coughing, and realizes he needs to hide and recover his strength fast. If he keeps running without regaining power, they'll catch him eventually. Caden's weighing his options when a cat emerges from a cardboard box in the alley. He stares at the animal, exhausted. This should work. He approaches the cat, who doesn't seem to care about his presence. The alley flashes with light. Then darkness swallows the houses again. Everything goes silent. The sun sets over the city. At a pet store, bags of cat food hang from the counter. A blond guy scans the shelves with delight, eyes darting from sale items to new varieties. He's trying to be responsible. His cats have specific dietary needs, and he can't overfeed them, but this is one of their favorite foods. He spots the bags that sold out last time, finally back in stock. His gaze lands on new varieties too. He fidgets, thinking the cats will need to approve before he commits to anything. He's a little worried they might reject the new products, so maybe he should wait. But some varieties are on sale for the last day only. He decides if he's going to buy, he should buy big. His excited gaze catches a toy with good reviews. He presses a finger to his lips, torn. In the end, he buys a lot of goods. The store owner is pleased. Golden rays drown the houses. The guy stands at the crosswalk, rummaging through his bag and muttering to himself. He'd expected to buy something for himself, but now he's broke. He packs the bag into his backpack with a satisfied smile, thinking his cats will love it, so everything's fine. Suddenly, his attention shifts. A mother's talking on the phone while her child runs around her. The boy darts into the road without looking. A car rushes down the street. The guy freezes, realizing the car won't stop in time. Headlights illuminate the frightened figure of the boy, who ran out to grab his ball. The guy immediately bolts into the road. He moves with lightning speed. Everything around him seems to slow down. He grabs the boy in his arms and carries him away from the car. Tires screech, leaving dark marks on the asphalt. The guy breathes a sigh of relief as they land on the sidewalk. The boy looks ahead in surprise, not understanding what just happened. The guy sits down next to him, arms around his shoulders, checking if the child's okay. He admits he was scared. Around them, the crowd murmurs, surprised phrases about the child disappearing, people asking each other if they saw what happened. The guy stands up and says he has to go, calling himself the older brother. The boy's mother calls out to her son. The boy looks at the guy one last time, and the guy thinks he's glad to the depths of his soul that he could save this boy's life with his ability. The mother asks if her son is hurt, reminding him she was worried. She asks who helped him. The child points at the spot where the young man just stood, but he's already disappeared into the crowd. The guy walks past people, thinking he used his ability intuitively the moment he saw the boy in trouble. He only realized it now. If he's careless, people will find out. Lights are on in the houses. In one of the blocks, the boy comes down the steps with bowls in his hands, calling his cats. He apologizes for being late today. He had business at school. He sits down next to the cats and wonders if his 3 cats are family or just friends. The cats meow, but they're not eating. The boy asks worriedly what's wrong. He's confused. He spent all his allowance on this food. The black and white cat seems to be calling him to follow. He stands up and follows the cats, who are leading him somewhere. He asks where they're going, then realizes they want him to follow them. The animals lead him into a gateway. The black and white cat disappears around the corner. The guy looks out from behind the wall and asks in surprise if they've arrived. Suddenly, he finds a ginger cat lying on the floor, covered in blood. Warm light pours from the windows. Through his blurred vision, Caden sees lamps on the ceiling. His gaze focuses. He's in a room, though he doesn't understand where. He remembers losing consciousness. He raises his front paw, then his back paw. Caden twitches his ears and exhales heavily. He's in the body of a cat. Caden squints, remembering exactly what he did. He recalls approaching the indifferent cat and reaching out to touch its head. As soon as Caden made contact, a bright flash lit up the space. Waves of power vibrated around them. Caden thought with surprise that he'd successfully inhabited another life form. Suddenly, he hears a question about whether he's awake. A boy enters the room, glad to see the cat conscious. When he found it, the animal was unconscious and covered in blood, and he almost thought it was dead. The young man happily says everything seems fine. Caden asks himself what kind of simple-minded person this is. This child brought him to his home while he was unconscious. Suddenly, the boy runs out of the room as if he remembered something. Caden listens with displeasure to strange sounds from another part of the house. The boy enters with 2 bowls of food and apologizes for the wait. Caden looks at the bowls with displeasure. The guy asks why the cat was in such a state, then chatters about how the cat had many wounds. When he saw the animal covered in blood, he thought it had serious blood loss and open wounds, but then realized it was just covered in blood. The young man thinks with fear that the cat might have a wound he didn't check. Caden thinks with displeasure that this guy is too talkative. He's been chatting since the moment Caden woke up. The guy puts the bowl of milk on the floor. He squats with a satisfied face and says the cat is probably very hungry, so it needs to eat. It'll feel better immediately. Caden silently looks at the bowl of milk. The boy opens a can with a click and pours food into the second bowl. He suggests the cat should eat since it'll help it recover quickly. Caden looks at the bowls with disgust, thinking angrily that this fool dares to give him cat food. The guy asks the cat to hurry up and eat. It's very tasty. Caden watches with displeasure. Suddenly, the cat's stomach growls from hunger. He exhales heavily and goes to the bowl, thinking he has no other choice. This guy thinks he's an ordinary cat, and Caden needs to regain his strength as soon as possible. This food is disgusting, but he has no choice. He begins to drink milk. Suddenly, he's lifted from the floor. The guy picks up the cat, wanting to check if it's a boy or a girl. Caden gets furious and mentally asks what the guy is allowing himself to do. The guy begins to look around. He thought he heard a rough male voice, but maybe he forgot to turn off the TV in the next room. Caden, with an angry expression, mentally tells him to let him go immediately if he doesn't want the cat to clean his dirty ears with its claws. The guy feels horror. He lets go of the cat and jumps away, scared that the cat is talking. He's shaking with fear, not understanding what's going on. Caden clicks his tongue and asks him to be quiet. He's too loud. The cat takes a couple of steps forward and asks the boy's name. The boy continues to look at the cat with fear. Caden stands in front of him and threateningly asks his name. The boy asks him to repeat the question. The cat looks closely and says he asked his name. The boy continues to shake. Caden loses his temper, pulls out his claws, and threateningly asks if the man wants him to repeat himself. The boy says he's Seju. Caden sits down on the floor and orders Seju to bring that chair here. Seeing the boy hesitate, he threateningly says he won't repeat himself. Seju immediately rushes for the chair. He moves it closer to the cat and sits down opposite him on the floor. The cat calmly approaches the chair. Seju watches tensely. Caden climbs onto the chair with difficulty, exhaling heavily. It's strange that it's so difficult for him to climb up here. It's because he's not used to this body. The cat sits down in a human manner, which touches the guy. Suddenly, Caden pulls out his claws and threateningly says that if Seju blabs about him, he'll kill him. The cat hooks the guy's shirt as if grabbing him by the chest. But as soon as he turns around, his attention is drawn to something else. He abruptly lets go and looks in the mirror. A disgruntled ginger cat is reflected. Caden thinks he's very plump. He carefully examines his reflection, touching his face with his paw. He has a double chin. His gaze drops lower. He grabs the skin on his stomach. His pupils narrow. He's become a fat cat. The cat sits on the chair with a disconcerted expression, shaking from the realization that he, Caden, has turned into this. Caden cries out in frustration. Seju looks at the cat in fear. He runs to the cat, who seems to not be breathing. He begins to shake Caden to wake him up. Caden thinks who would have thought he'd incarnate into this unattractive fat cat. Seju excitedly picks up the cat, asking what happened. Caden suddenly screamed and passed out. Caden wonders if he doesn't have the strength to move to another body. Does that mean he'll have to stay in this shameful state until his body recovers? Seju begins to shake the cat, begging it not to die. Finally, Caden asks him to stop. Seju seems to be cradling the cat in his arms, happy that it woke up. The cat angrily explains that it never passed out, asking him to let it go. The boy carefully places the animal on the floor and explains he was scared when the cat fainted, so he's glad it's okay. Caden turns around in displeasure and asks why on earth he'd be scared of fainting. Seju just smiles. Caden looks at the boy silently. He exhales heavily, thinking this is a strange child. Caden turns back to the mirror. He's still unhappy with his reflection. The fat cat wonders why he had to be a fat cat. Seju raises his hand and addresses him as Mr. Cat, saying he has a question. Caden asks to be called Caden. The cat hears the question. Since he's a cat, why does he talk? Caden exhales heavily and explains he talks because he's a human, which is obvious. The boy repeats this phrase in surprise. The cat turns to him and says that although he looks like this now, he's a human, just temporarily in the form of a cat. The boy clarifies that Caden is a human turned into a cat. Caden confirms this, though he says the boy doesn't need to know the details since it's too complicated to explain. Seju sits with a confused expression, not understanding how this is even possible. How could a person become a cat? Caden lies down on the floor, saying the answer to his first question should be obvious at first glance, and the answer to the second question is that he simply thought it was possible. When he tried it, it worked. There's a conversation in the room about Seju not understanding anything. Caden replies he doesn't need to understand. The boy is interested in why Caden turned into a cat and why he was unconscious and covered in blood. Caden believes it's none of his business. They look at each other in silence. The cat snorts and says that even though they met due to unforeseen circumstances, the boy should not try to find out more than he does now. He doesn't need to know anything at all. Seju scratches the back of his head and agrees with the cat. An awkward silence reigns between them. Suddenly, the cat's stomach growls again. Seju immediately hands him a bowl of food and tells him to hurry up and eat. He's been unconscious for a while and is also injured. Caden looks at him with displeasure, reminding him that he's a cat temporarily. Even after he said that, the guy still tries to feed him cat food. Seju shrugs and says that maybe Caden is a human, but he's currently in a cat's body. Cats aren't good for human food, and besides, he's injured and will only get worse. Seju goes to the door and says the cat should eat again. He'll go outside and feed the other cats since the situation was chaotic and the kittens are probably very hungry. Caden looks at the bowl and thinks the child is right. He's heard that human food is bad for cats. Since he's a real cat now, he should eat food like any other normal cat. He should force himself to eat this food to quickly regain his strength. He carefully approaches the bowl and sniffs the food, thinking no one would believe Caden would ever eat cat food. He shouldn't think about that, only about his strength. He tastes the food and is unexpectedly impressed. Boom. Caden reaches for the bowl. He begins to chew. For some reason, the cat can't stop eating. It's so delicious. Finally, he falls away from the bowl, stuffed to the brim. The cat thinks discontentedly about who would have thought Caden would gorge himself on cat food. He decides it wasn't he who ate the cat food, it was the chubby cat who couldn't stop. His stomach growls again. Caden looks at himself with displeasure, thinking this body is just awful. Besides, this body has no strength left at all. If those freaks found him now, he wouldn't even have the strength to defend himself. The best option would be to stay like this until the body recovered. Deep night falls over the houses. Seju enters the room and says he needs to leave for a while. The cat asks where he's going. The guy answers that he needs to go to the veterinary clinic. He doesn't have any cat food for tomorrow because he bought a lot of treats but not food. The cat doubtfully asks why he's going at this hour. Seju exclaims in surprise. He sits down next to the cat and asks with a smile if he wants to go with him. Caden glares at the boy and asks with displeasure why all of a sudden. Seju looks very cute when he asks him not to break down and to come together. What if he told someone about him? Is he worried? Caden doubts, thinking this kid is trying to make him believe he's untrustworthy. He turns away with displeasure and says letting him go alone is risky, so he should keep an eye on him. Seju picks him up. He grabs the cat and heads for the exit. Annoyed, Caden asks what he's doing. Seju nervously says the cat is hurt, so he thought it would be better if he carried it. Caden begins to scratch and get indignant, shouting to let him go immediately. Does the boy really think he'd go outside in such a humiliating manner? A lantern illuminates the street. Seju carries Caden in his arms, tucking him under his jacket. The cat's measured movements are making him feel sick. Caden's eyes widen. He thinks about the annoying but comforting feeling coming over him. He has to remember he has a cat's body, but he's not a cat. He's just tired. It's probably because he turned into a cat for the first time. Having calmed himself with this, the cat closes his eyes. Seju walks down the street while Caden, falling asleep, thinks this isn't so bad. They arrive at El Pet Hospital. An elderly doctor comes out to meet Seju, asking what he's doing there so late. Seju explains he came to buy cat food and wanted the doctor to check the cat. He thought it was injured. Caden turns around with displeasure, thinking this kid lied to him. The doctor thoughtfully asks him to bring the cat to the table, then begins checking the basics on the computer, asking if he's brought this cat here before and what its name is. Having learned the cat's name, the man turns around with interest and notes that such a bulky name suits its appearance. The cat itself irritably thinks he should kill it. The doctor approaches the cat to examine it. He carefully turns its head, even examines under its tail, then checks the teeth. Caden thinks about how shameful this is. The doctor finally says he doesn't see any special problems. Seju looks at the table and says there was so much blood when he found it. The doctor replies he doesn't see a wound from where blood could come from. However, there are a few scratches, but only first aid would be enough here. He can't do anything else. Seju lets out a sigh of relief, ignoring the cat's displeasure. Caden glares at the boy, thinking that fool is still worrying about him. The doctor looks at the cat with concern and says it should go on a diet. Caden thinks about killing the man again. The doctor's voice rings out in the hospital, saying he won't give any recommendations. They should just take care of him and come back if any symptoms appear. Seju is glad the cat's okay. As they walk back home, suddenly something catches Caden's attention. He listens to the sounds behind him. Caden, wrapped in Seju's jacket, mutters in surprise that there are more monster cats in the area. Seju looks at him in surprise and confusion, asking what he's talking about. At that moment, he also hears a sound coming from around the corner. Scarlet eyes flash in the alley. A white cat with black stripes slowly walks into the light. Seju looks at the cat in fear, wondering if this is the monster. The cat looks more like a tiger than a cat, though maybe it seems so because Caden is a cat now. But this one looks different. You can tell this cat feels different because of its size. Just as they're thinking about what to do, the cat monster lets out a roar. Seju suggests running away and quickly runs in the opposite direction from the monster. As the boy runs, Caden looks behind them, saying he's thinking quickly. The cat thought all the boy would do was stand there and tremble, but at this speed, the monster will quickly catch up. The monster cat is really catching up with big leaps. It makes a big jump. The monster extends its claws. Seju dodges the blow at the last moment. The boy is assaulted and hits the trash cans. He falls on them with his back, protecting Caden from the blow. They look at the monster cat. Caden asks if he's okay. Seju replies the cat only tore his clothes, then asks what they should do. It'd be better if they had at least some kind of weapon. Suddenly, the boy remembers he put something in his pocket. He takes out a stick that's lengthening in size. Seju holds it in front of him and orders the monster not to come closer. Caden looks at the teaser toy with a furry monster dangling from the end in surprise. The toy swings from side to side. The cats freeze. Caden looks at the toy with interest, wondering if Seju is sick for using this to fight back. Is this divine weapon the only thing they have? The furry little monster swings to the right, then to the left. Caden looks mesmerized. The cat monster lets out a roar and attacks again. Seju holds the toy out in front of him. The sudden movement causes it to dangle wildly. Seju opens his eyes, realizing there's been no impact. It turns out the cat monster is jumping after the toy. Seju turns to Caden and says this is their chance to escape. However, Caden is also running after the toy. There's a flash of light. Lightning pierces the space in an explosion. Caden hangs in midair as the defeated man below begins to repeat that he admits defeat. Victory is for Caden. He's leaving the battlefield. People behind him are whispering about how Caden won again. How many times has this happened? He's challenging everyone who's strong and winning. People are looking at him, talking about how even the most famous big shots no longer accept his challenge. They're avoiding him at all costs. Is it not because even the strongest of the awakened can't withstand his strength? A man in a business suit stands in front of Caden, offering to join them. He extends his hand and promises to appoint him as his right hand. After that, they'll conquer this world together. Another group of people offers to join them in conquering the world. The next group that wants him to join them kneels down. The cat's eye opens as memories flood him. He's alarmed to hear a question about what he's doing. Caden finds himself playing with a teaser and nervously looks back at Seju. There's an awkward silence, and only the monster cat is preparing to pounce. The monster reaches the teaser in one big leap. It grabs the toy with its teeth. The monster pulls the teaser towards itself and tears it out of the boy's hands. The monster runs away, taking the teaser with it, while Caden thinks sadly about how his body moved on its own. Seju looks at the growling monster with dismay. Finally, the monster cat spits out the teaser. The streetlights illuminate the quiet street. Seju slowly walks down the steps, holding the cat in his arms. Caden says he was right. It was the cat, because that's how he reacted. Seju peeks around the corner, asking why the cat looks like that. It's too big to be a normal cat. Caden replies he doesn't know. Maybe the owner didn't give it treats. Seju hides around the corner again, saying the cat is no longer visible. Maybe it stopped chasing them, so he thinks they're safe. Caden replies that maybe the boy is safe, but that might not be true for others. Seju asks what the cat means. Caden replies that maybe the boy escaped from that monster, but what does he think will happen if someone else finds it? Caden, lounging in the boy's arms, says there aren't many people on the street right now since it's late, but the monster will definitely attack anyone it meets. Though they might quickly figure out what's going on and run home. Seju grabs his head, not knowing what to do. He hadn't even thought about it. Caden looks at the guy with surprise and asks what he means. The only answer is to run away like they did before. Seju excitedly replies that Caden saw how fast that cat ran. Someone will definitely get hurt. The guy replies they should call and report it. Seju thinks about it. He scratches the back of his head and says with an awkward smile that he doesn't have a cell phone. He left it at home. Caden sighs heavily and says it means they can't do anything. It doesn't look like he can do anything about it. Seju excitedly says he can fix the situation. Caden is confused, asking what the guy is talking about. Why on earth should he do anything at all? The flashlight glows brightly when Seju says it's weird to hear a cat swearing. Caden starts to whine about what this guy could do, then asks if he's seen that cat, especially its claws that could cut a car. The boy can only answer that they still can't leave it like that. Caden asks why. Seju, with annoyance, asks why he's still talking about it. It isn't his concern. The boy looks at the cat seriously, which makes him very angry. He knows he could get hurt, but he still wants to go there. Caden thinks this boy is a softie. Seju asks Caden to go home while he'll somehow try to cope with the cat. Seju frowns and thinks he definitely used to be that cat. Such a gentle and affectionate cat. He doesn't know why it became like that, but the boy really can't leave it like that. Caden looks at the boy with annoyance. He closes his eyes and sighs heavily. His irritated voice sounds on the street when he says that if the guy really decided to do something, he'll help him. This greatly surprises Seju. Caden concentrates and says it's not much, but he'll give him his powers that he can use. However, it should be enough to reason with that cat. Seju happily sits down next to the cat and asks if this is really possible. Caden moves away from him and asks him not to be so excited. When he gives him the power, it'll soon disappear, so he'll be able to use it for a very short time. The cat asks him to come here and sit down. They should be on the same level. Seju immediately squats down next to the cat. Caden raises his paw. He touches the boy's forehead. Seju blushes, and the cat is embarrassed. Suddenly, small particles of light seem to explode around the cat. Seju's eyes widen in surprise. Power begins to concentrate around him. Whirlwinds of power soar upward. Due to the transfer of power, a street lamp explodes. Power pierces the entire space of the city. It's as if electric discharges run through the streets. Seju's body is glowing. He looks at his hands, overflowing with power, and says in surprise that he feels how the power inside is overflowing him. Even light emanates from his body. Tired, Caden says it's because he has the power of light. While Seju is admiring his newfound strength and saying he can now go look for the cat, someone's claws click on the steps. Caden turns around, saying Seju doesn't need to do that. It's already here. The monster cat growls deep in its throat. Seju takes a step forward and asks the cat to stay behind him. It could be dangerous. Caden smirks and asks what he's talking about. He wants him to stay behind because it's dangerous? Suddenly, Caden realizes something. He looks at the boy and thinks that now that he thinks about it, this kid is calm despite everything. A normal person would be scared standing in front of the monster, even if he lent him some of his strength. The human fear wouldn't evaporate. He looks closely at the guy, who's asking if this is the same cat that came to his house a couple of days ago. Caden thinks with displeasure that the guy is crazy. He thinks the cat understands what he's talking about. Seju looks at the angry cat and says he thought it was strange that he hadn't been seen for the last couple of days. He asks what happened to the cat. The monster cat squeezes his paw. He jumps. The monster cat attacks Seju. Caden screams in fear, asking what the guy is doing. He asks him to hurry up and hide. The paw is dangerously close to Seju's face. The guy abruptly squats, using his strength and dodging the attack. He sighs in relief. Caden is surprised by such a lightning-fast reaction. The monster cat continues to attack. Seju successfully avoids his attacks. Caden narrows his eyes and thinks about this child. He watches the boy's movements carefully, thinking he's not avoiding the attacks by chance. Caden watches their fight and thinks Seju is reading the cat's movements and responding to them. He doesn't understand how this is possible. Even if his eyes were able to see it, a normal person wouldn't be able to react so quickly. The space explodes with white light as the cat thinks he's not using the powers he gave him at all. Seju is simply completely avoiding the attacks. The monster cat continues to scratch the space. Finally, it hits. Seju thinks Caden said he'd be able to fight the cat with the power he gave him, but he won't be able to use it for long. He looks closely at the monster cat and thinks he shouldn't waste this power in vain. He needs to wait for the right moment and take him down. Suddenly, that moment comes. Right now. Seju dodges another attack. He flies to the wall, pushes off from it. When the cat almost gets him, Caden thinks with surprise about this movement. This isn't the power he gave him. Caden saw that the monster couldn't catch up with this child. Suddenly, the cat monster loses sight of his victim. As soon as he raises his head up, he sees Seju is already rushing to attack. Caden thinks, surprised, that this child is endowed with speed and agility. Seju uses Caden's power. Lightning spreads from his hands, and a crack is heard. He says he's very sorry, then attacks the cat. A deafening explosion is heard in the gateway. The space is cracking with power. Lightning is carried along the entire staircase. Seju sits on the floor and breathes heavily after the battle, looking at the defeated cat. He's sad that he had to hit the cat. Seju is approached by Caden, who says he's surprised when he rushed straight into the fight. Who would have thought he had such an ability? Seju chuckles knowingly, asking if the cat is dead. He looks at the monster cat, who's simply unconscious. Hissing comes from the cat's body. It seems to have shrunk in size. Finally, the monster cat looks like a normal cat. Seju exclaims that he knew it was him. A conversation spreads through the street about how they don't have time for this. Soon people will come running here due to all the noise. A quick stroke cuts through the space. The man sits down on the railing. He's standing on one of the antennas, looking at his phone. The man with gray hair mutters under his breath that this is strange. For some reason, this device can't find the sample he'd grown. The man sighs with displeasure and says that an hour ago it showed he was somewhere here. He thinks the device is broken. Does it make sense to awaken the seal on the sample himself? The gray-haired man squeezes the phone until it creaks. He doesn't want to use force to avoid the bloodhounds, but he sees no other way out. The man closes his eyes and thinks he doesn't want to miss such an opportunity. The experiment could be successful. When the gray-haired man opens his eyes, they glow red. Scarlet emanations of power begin to spread from him in all directions. The man asks where the sample is, then orders it to hurry up and return to him. The light is on in Seju's house. An open first aid kit is lying on the floor, clearly just used. Seju sighs with relief. He looks at the bandaged cat and says he did everything he could. He asks Caden if this is enough. Caden replies that everything's fine. The ginger cat says he's been through a lot of stress, but other than that, there are no problems. Seju leans over the cat and says with concern in his voice that it'd still be better to show him to the doctor. Caden looks at the guy with displeasure and says maybe he's too weak to turn into a monster, but it's not certain. What would he do if it turned right in the clinic after the treatment? Seju says he knows, but he's still worried. The guy begins to pack a first aid kit when Caden asks him to stop whining. Everything will be fine, and he still can't do anything if something goes wrong. The ginger cat looks closely at his recent opponent. The former monster cat is sleeping on the couch. Caden thinks it could well be him, but who would have thought the cat would turn into a monster like this? He not only increased in size but also became incredibly strong. A normal cat definitely can't do such a thing. He narrows his eyes and considers the possibility that it's been awakened. Suddenly, the orange cat is called by Seju. He looks flustered as he makes excuses for being a little busy giving first aid to the kitten, so he hadn't had a chance to say anything, but he's not sure where to start. Caden thinks about how this kid is really frustrating sometimes and wonders out loud what he wants to say. Seju finally makes up his mind and starts talking about the thing he did when he fought the cat. Caden asks about the time he moved really fast. Seju says he means it, then holds his hands out in front of him and asks him not to tell anyone about it. The boy is nervous when he says he doesn't want people to know about his ability to move. Caden looks at the boy with a haughty look and asks if he thinks the red cat would be wandering around talking about his awakened ability. Seju asks in surprise what awakened ability is. It's Caden's turn to be surprised. The boy doesn't know about awakened abilities, and he himself is awakened. The red cat looks at the boy with suspicion. He sighs heavily and says he understands everything. The boy doesn't know he's awakened because there are rare cases like him. People who don't know they're endowed with an awakened ability. Seju raises his hand and says he has a question for Master Caden. He asks about awakened ones and whether his high-speed ability to move quickly is an awakened ability. The red cat says this is a true statement. Seju excitedly asks if he's awakened and if there are others with an ability like him. Caden chuckles. The boy is looking at one of them. Seju looks at the cat in surprise. He asks if Caden is awakened and has abilities. The cat confirms it time and time again. In the end, Caden gets angry and asks if he thinks a normal person could turn into a cat. Seju is touched. Caden nervously asks what's wrong. They look at each other in silence. Seju wipes his eyes with his hand and apologizes. He always thought he was the only one who was abnormal. Caden realizes that all this time, the boy hadn't known anyone who had the same ability. He says with slight sadness in his voice that it's true. If a person tries to live a normal life without knowing anything about others with an awakened ability, it's hard for him. Seju clenches his fists and says his mother even forbade him to use his ability when she found out. When he was younger, he used it once. After that, he could never forget how his friends looked at him when they saw it. He looks at the flower in the vase and says back then he was called a monster. Since then, he hid his ability, until today. He even moved a lot so people wouldn't become suspicious of him. He's constantly scared because of it but doesn't talk about it with his mother because he doesn't want to worry her. What if it's an illness? Or suddenly someone saw him? The boy's words flow about how if people really found out about him, they'd try to steal him, experiment on him, or just deny him. Caden listens to the boy in silence. Seju, with tears in his eyes, speaks about how there are others, not only Caden, but people with special abilities. It makes him cry because now he knows he's not sick. He just has an awakened ability. Caden turns away from him and says he also feels better in some way. An awkward silence reigns in the room. Seju asks the red cat to tell a little about the awakened. Caden begins his story by saying people with special abilities are called those endowed with awakened abilities, or awakened for short. They still don't know when these abilities began to appear and how they appear in people. But these abilities can be associated with both physical and mental capabilities. In addition, some awakened have the ability to use telekinesis. Others have destructive power. Others can concentrate power, exploding. Seju says with delight that the awakened are just like superheroes from comics or movies. Caden replies it's possibly very similar. He continues, saying that depending on his ability, he can also do different things. The red cat says his main ability is to move at high speed, but he can do other things related to this. Caden suggests that after a few years, his ability became more powerful. Seju replies that at first he could use it once a day and only for a second, but now he can use it from 3 to 5 seconds a day. The cat asks if that's all. Caden assumes that the whole time the boy was afraid to use the ability, he didn't develop it. After his story, it becomes clear he didn't put any effort into training. He understands how desperate he was, hiding the ability. Seju asks with interest if all awakened ones train their abilities. Caden asks. Most people didn't want to become stronger having such an ability, since they could do whatever they wanted. Seju thoughtfully says he'd like to continue to hide it. The red cat says the boy seems to be a special case when the boy's stomach growls. He awkwardly apologizes. He didn't have time to grab anything from dinner. The red cat irritably says they're discussing serious things here. Seju stands up and says he'll quickly bring something to eat. The boy brings bread. He begins to chew the bread when the cat's stomach also growls. The boy looks at Caden in surprise, who embarrassedly turns away. Seju pours the food into the bowl. He sits down next to the ginger cat and asks him to eat. He also hasn't eaten anything since dinner. Caden looks at the bowl sadly, thinking about how he's giving cat food again. Seju asks him to hurry up and endure the cat food. The ginger cat looks at the food silently. He sighs heavily. He begins to eat with appetite, thinking about how he can't resist eating cat food since he's hungry. They both crunch on the food in the room. At this time, the scarlet aura reaches their house. It begins to penetrate the windows with a hiss. Caden turns sharply to the windows, feeling the aura. He frowns, thinking about what kind of energy this is. He barely noticed. He's too weak. He watches tensely as the energy surrounds the house and thinks it's not normal. Suddenly, the former monster cat opens his eyes, responding to the energy. He jumps up from the couch. The white cat begins to rush around the room, looking for a way out. Finally, he finds an open window. The cat jumps out of the open window. Caden and Seju look after him in surprise. The guy exclaims in surprise that this cat just ran away. Caden replies it's impossible that he missed the moment when it went crazy. He looks angrily at the window and says he can't believe it left them so quickly. Or was it all because of that strange energy? Suddenly, Seju catches his attention. The guy is getting ready. The red cat asks what he's doing. Seju pulls his cap on his head and decisively says he must find this cat. It'd be bad if it attacked someone. Caden blocks his way, saying he couldn't be helped the first time, so he shouldn't poke his nose in this time either. The cat doesn't have the power to become a monster again like that time. Seju replies that means it'd be easier to bring him back. The boy touches the brim of his cap and says he's worried about other people, but he's also worried about the cat. He won't let it get hurt. Caden looks at the boy silently. He exhales heavily, saying he's coming with him. Seju is surprised by this. Caden says he's curious about why the cat became like this, and that ominous energy outside is bothering him. He turns to the boy and asks him not to misunderstand. He's coming because he's worried about him. Seju thanks him anyway and says he feels more confident now that Caden is coming with him. The boy asks him to stop talking and follow him. He reminds him again not to misunderstand. At this time, the street is deserted and quiet. Seju carries Caden in his arms and runs along the street. His legs move quickly. He bounces off the ground like a feather. The sound of his feet echoes along the street as Caden says his movement is quite good, just like when he fought with the cat. The red cat, wrapped in a jacket, says he's sure his awakened speed ability, like the others, will develop very soon. Seju looks at the cat in surprise and says he understands his speed ability has become better, but what other abilities is he talking about? He said something like that before. The cat explains that any part of his body affected by his movement will develop, such as his nervous system and cognitive abilities. So it'd be more correct to assume he's been developing these passive abilities all this time. It's not just him. Other awakened ones not only strengthen their bodies but also develop other abilities related to their awakened powers. Seju says he understands. Caden says after this to turn left. The boy immediately turns left. Seju quickly moves his legs. He holds the cat tightly and runs with all his might. Caden listens. He asks about how much longer the boy can use his ability. The boy answers he used them before, but several hours have passed since then, so he thinks about 2 seconds. If he uses it for short periods of time, then perhaps he could last a little longer. The red cat doubtfully thinks about 2 seconds. Seju continues running through the streets, asking where to run next. The red cat replies to continue running straight ahead. The guy asks how he knows that. Caden replies he just knows. He watches the streams of aura. The cat says with displeasure that if this is what he thinks, then it's connected with the awakened one. As it seems to him, the monster cat is running straight towards him. Seju, running without slowing down, manages to ask about the awakened one he told him about earlier. Caden replies the guy should get ready. A lantern illuminates the street. Bloody bandages are lying on the floor. The monster cat tiredly comes out from around the corner. He barely moves his paws when it sounds. It must be him. The white-haired man leans towards the cat and says the fact that he came after hearing his order confirms this. He wonders what went wrong. He's not as expected and can barely stand. The cat looks at the man in fear when he says he wouldn't have escaped from the special cage in such a state. Suddenly, power pierces the monster cat. He remembers the cage, how he was lying in it and felt sick. He remembers this man now. The white-haired man leans towards him. The fur on the cat's body stands on end. The white-haired man says with displeasure that it's threatening him. The seal they placed during the experiment must have broken. The monster cat growls and hisses. The man says it looks like it's become stronger. He smirks and says he knew it had awakened. Seju peeks around the corner. He tells the cat it's there. Caden immediately asks him to stop. He orders him to hide. The cat manages to pull him along with it. They hide behind a wall. Caden peeks out from behind the wall. Seju peeks behind it and asks what's wrong. The cat they're looking for is here. Caden asks if he doesn't see that guy up ahead. Seju asks about that man. Caden replies he's awakened. Seju asks again, scared, about the awakened. Caden says with an evil expression there's no need to even think about going there, especially when his opponent is awakened. In his opinion, there's a certain connection between this person and the cat. Maybe the energy from before was a kind of summoning command. He thinks about the fact that this person isn't the one who was chasing him before. He looks at the white-haired man and thinks he's here because of the monster cat and is using his abilities like this. The monster cat rushes to attack. It attacks the white-haired man. The man closes his eyes. He puts his hand in front of him and stops the cat. The monster cat is slammed into the wall. He looks at the animal with drool coming out of its mouth and says it knows it won't be enough to kill it. The cat rushes into battle again. The man's eyes flash. The monster cat is surrounded by scarlet energy again. The man raises his hand and thinks about whether it'll survive this time. The animal is slammed into the wall again. The white-haired man orders him to get up. The street is quiet. Seju watches this scene with fear. Caden says with displeasure that this man is a very skilled awakened one. He carefully watches his small hand movements, which indicate he's in full control of his powers. Judging by the power he used on the cat, he's a psychokinetic. The white-haired man curses and asks the cat lying on the ground if this is all. He walks up to the animal. The white-haired man thoughtfully rubs his chin and says it seems it's physically superior to an ordinary cat but still lacks something. This is the limit of his awakened potential. The cat growls. The man is surprised it's still conscious. Seju pulls his cap down over his face. He crouches down and says he doesn't understand what's happening. He has to save this cat. Its body hasn't yet recovered from their fight. Caden asks him not to be an idiot. He looks at the guy with displeasure and says this man is awakened. Does he think it'll be the same as with the cat? Seju says excitedly he knows it isn't, but being awakened doesn't give him the right to do the things this man does. Caden angrily tells him not to be so naive. What could he do? Does he think this guy will just let him go after he saves the cat? Seju asks nervously what he'd do if this man decided to follow him. Does he really think he'd get into a fight where his life is on the line? Seju turns away, near the house where they're hiding. It's said the boy has lived his whole life without knowing about the existence of the awakened, but now that he knows, he doesn't think he can fight them. Maybe he feels inspired after defeating the cat, or the tiger, or whatever it was. But fighting an awakened is completely different. He can't win this fight, so he should accept it. The boy is silent. Caden looks at him angrily and thinks he should understand this now. When he fought an awakened, he was fighting death. It's stupid to think someone who just learned about the existence of the awakened could fight against them. The white-haired man approaches the cat, who's barely trying to get up, and says he shouldn't have the strength to fight. The monster cat growls. The man doesn't understand why the cat doesn't run away. Does it really want to scare him? This upsets him. The cat starts to run away. The silver-haired man smirks and says the cat won't be able to escape. He uses his power again and pulls the cat towards him. The space flashes. The cat is lying on the ground again. He falls down, exhausted. The silver-haired man says the expectations were higher for the experiment presented, but the most important thing is the result was a success. It's time to collect the sample. Seju doesn't understand how this man could treat the cat so terribly. He tells Caden he's going to try to save it with his own strength. Caden becomes angry. The boy isn't listening to him. The boy pulls his cap down over his face and says he's not trying to fight him. He's only going to save the cat. The red cat replies the boy might be fast, but that man is awakened. Their perceptions can't be compared with those of ordinary people. He guarantees he'll be able to see him even if the boy uses his speed. Seju looks at the cat and apologizes, saying he knows he's angry because he's worried about him. The red cat is indignant at this suggestion. Seju says maybe his powers are useless and he could get hurt, but he wants to save this cat. Caden looks at the guy in surprise. Seju uses his ability. The cat watches everything from the corner and thinks about how the guy isn't very smart in what he's going to do. He looks at the psychokinetic and thinks about how this guy is already close to the cat. He's going to make this man turn around and use this chance to take the cat. But for this, Seju will need to use his ability. This means he won't be able to escape. The gray-haired man approaches the injured cat. Suddenly, he stops. Seju suddenly appears in front of him. He picks up the cat in his arms. The man doesn't understand where this child came from. He looks at him carefully and thinks it doesn't matter. How dare he try to steal the target of his experiment? The white-haired man tries to get a good look at the boy too. He uses his power and hits the spot where the cat and the boy had been recently. However, it turns out he's disappeared. The white-haired man turns around and doesn't understand where he's gone. He was right in front of him. He puts his hand on his head and thinks the boy is a bloodhound. He knows he shouldn't have used his powers like that. Who would have thought they'd find him so quickly? The psychokinetic tells himself he has to get out of here before the other bloodhounds show up. The street is empty. It's very quiet outside. Caden quickly moves his paws. Seju is glad they did it. The cat angrily asks what he's talking about. They haven't done anything. Now this man knows about him, and he doesn't understand what danger they're in now. Seju looks at the injured cat wrapped in his jacket. He thinks happily he couldn't just leave it like that. Caden is angry. Seju blushes and says he had to try to save it. He couldn't just leave like that. Caden is surprised. He orders the boy not to laugh. He thinks this guy is hopeless. Caden thinks they actually did it, and they did it right in front of that man. He remembers the recent events and thinks Seju's speed was faster than expected. Seju looks outside and says it must be strange, but he's so excited. The boy keeps smiling. Caden doesn't understand what he's talking about. Seju explains that today he realized the powers he wanted to hide weren't that bad. He looks at the injured cat again and says as soon as he realized this, he was able to make a decision and do something. The boy looks up at the sky and says it's amazing. The red cat asks him to shut up and not to admire it. The man slams the table and curses. He leans over the table and can't believe his test subject was stolen like that. It was an important specimen. He turns to Wyon and says he thought the bloodhounds had come for him. He turns to the boy and says besides the escaped specimen might have been successful, but the bloodhounds stole it before he could bring it back and verify it. They have to leave the room if they don't want to get caught, but they can't leave without the experimental specimen. They have to use the data collected in this room as a starting point and find the specimen. They have to be careful from now on. The young boy agrees with this. Caden places his paw on the injured cat's body. A blue haze appears from underneath it. Seju watches from a nearby chair. The cat removes his paw. The boy asks if everything's okay. His brows furrow in concern. Sitting down on the sofa, the awakened man explains that the rescued cat is very tired, but his life isn't in danger. The young man sighs with relief, stroking the gray cat's ear. He suggests it should have been much worse after such abuse. Caden explains a normal cat would have died by now, but an animal that's undergone awakening has become strong enough to endure such blows. Stroking its nose, Seju asks if this kitten is also awakened. The answer is affirmative. Smiling, the guy suggests in this case, the term awakened feline would be more appropriate than awakened creature. Thoughtfully knitting his eyebrows, the ginger cat suggests his relative isn't fully awakened. To find out, it's necessary to conduct an examination. Propping his muzzle with his paw, Caden is surprised that someone other than a human could be awakened. He thinks in the past there were people who conducted experiments on animals, which could mean the rescued cat became awakened during the experiment. Remembering the old man sitting in front of him, the red cat assumes this whole situation might be related to him. This means they're in a very dangerous situation. Looking at him, the boy asks what's wrong. His friend doesn't look well. Hitting him on the head, the red cat says everything's fine and accuses the boy of making their situation too difficult by getting in the way of the awakened one. Putting his hand to his head, Seju explains he couldn't do otherwise. If they left the cat alone, it would die. Opening his mouth in displeasure, Caden shouts their problem isn't that they saved the cat, but that they ran away from the awakened one and saved the cat. Baring his fangs, the red cat warns that crazy old man will definitely come here. Sitting on the floor, the boy's eyes widen in shock. Scratching the back of his head, he supposes the stranger really could be there, but saving an animal couldn't be a reason to pursue. Raising his eyebrows in shock, Caden realizes his comrade doesn't even understand what happened. Experiments on forced awakening are one of the main taboos of this world. Those psychokinetics won't leave living witnesses with physical proof of their experiments. The young man taps his fingers together in fear. Looking away, the ginger cat realizes the psychokinetics will certainly kill everyone involved in order to maintain the secret. Surprisingly, all this happened to the boy who didn't know about the existence of the awakened until recently. Squinting, Caden wonders if he should describe the situation in detail. Looking up, he decides he shouldn't do this and should continue to think of the boy as an ordinary person. Besides, the situation won't change in any way from his story. The heroes look in different directions, trying to avoid eye contact. Seju looks at his friend and apologizes for being too self-willed and for the fact that the cat is now upset. Rising up on his hind legs, the awakened one asks if the boy really thinks he's worried about him. Pointing his finger forward, Caden says he's in such a state because he has to solve other people's problems, not because he's worried about someone's life. The ginger cat asks if everything's clear now. The boy straightens up and answers in the affirmative. Falling onto the couch, the awakened one asks him to be careful. It's his actions that made the psychokinetic an enemy who'll definitely come to return what was stolen. The boy looks away and scratches his cheek. Caden is surprised at how quickly he relaxed. The phone lying on the table vibrates. Taking it in his hands, Seju is surprised it's already 7 in the morning. Watching his friend get dressed, the ginger cat asks where he's going. The boy replies he needs to go to school. Hearing this, the awakened one's eyes widen in shock. Pouring food into a bowl, the young man realizes he hasn't slept all night to help the injured animal. Taking the backpack in his hands, the boy says he's left some food for the cats and asks them not to forget about eating. Seju pauses for a second. Caden glances at him in surprise. Looking back, the boy asks what to do if the cat wakes up in his absence and goes crazy. Watching his fellow cat, the ginger cat promises to look after him and says his friend can leave in peace. The gray cat is lying on the couch. He doesn't have enough strength to regain consciousness. During their first meeting, he was much weaker. Grinning, the awakened one asks if his friend isn't confident in his victory. Clapping his hands, the young man declares his friend is very cool. Smiling contentedly, Caden brags about his strength and how many people know about it. He adds he wouldn't even talk to someone like a schoolboy. The boy reminds that now his friend is just a fat cat. The red cat orders him to shut up, his fur standing on end. Hiding behind the door, Seju announces his departure. The awakened one turns away. The boy peeks out from behind the door and calls him. Frowning in disappointment, the young man asks if the cat will be here when he returns from school. Fully showing himself from behind the door, the boy asks his friend to stay here and rest until his strength is fully restored. Running out the door, the schoolboy asks him to promise to stay. Hearing the click of the door, Caden's eyes widen. He's left alone in the apartment. Approaching the window, the ginger cat decides he can't refuse the child. He should really stay here for a while. His reflection is visible in the glass. The awakened one stares at him with displeasure. Hearing strange sounds, he looks around. Disgruntled cats come out from behind the door. They're walking around a relative they've never seen. Caden asks what's going on when the cat starts rubbing against him. The black and white cat approaches the bowl. The awakened one asks how dare they steal his food. The cat sniffs the food. Suddenly, he shudders. The cats look around in fear. An angry Caden is sitting in front of them. Squinting furiously, the ginger cat orders the others to leave here. The cats huddle together and tremble. The awakened one's pupil narrows sharply. Looking away, he calms down. In his memories, Seju squatted down and told him exactly how he found the injured cat. Realizing these are his saviors, Caden turns away. Lying down on the floor, the ginger cat resigns himself to the fact that the others can eat his food too. The stray cats creep up to the bowl. Looking around, they begin to eat the other cat's food. Suddenly, they look at their ginger brother. When the awakened one looks back, the cats begin to eat again, thinking they like the food. Caden narrows his eyes in displeasure. He ducks down. Hearing sounds from his stomach reminding him of hunger, the ginger cat notices canned food on the box. Releasing a claw, the awakened one thinks about how to open this can. Suddenly, Caden realizes he has sharp claws. In a second, the can is open. The ginger cat smiles widely and rejoices at his victory. The other cats immediately creep up behind him. Their eyes light up with maddened hunger. The sky above the houses turns yellow. Seju takes off his shoes and tells everyone he's returned from school. Suddenly, his eyebrows rise in surprise. There are cats lying under his feet, and empty cans lie around them. The boy squats down and wonders how they managed to open them. Noticing the scratch on the side and that all the cans have been opened in this way, The young man realizes no one tried to open the lid. The boy wonders how this could have happened while the well-fed awakened one sleeps soundly on the pillow. The woman squatted in front of her son. The boy was worried the other children were insulting him and calling him a monster because they couldn't move as fast. The girl was trying to convince him his miraculous ability was just a feature. She smiled and explained it's no one's fault her son is different from other children. Little Seju tilted his head and asked why they kept hiding if it's no one's fault. The woman silently turned down the corners of her lips. Looking at her, the child asked why no one wanted to be friends with him. His mother pressed her lips together. She fell to her knees. The girl hugged her son to her chest. Resting his head on her shoulder, the boy called out to his mother. His expression looked upset. Seju's eyes widen. In another memory, he's watching other children playing football. The boy looks at them with pursed lips. His gaze is sad. Hearing a sound, the child looks back. A ginger kitten is sitting next to him. The animal rubs its head against his trousers. Seju looks very scared. His eyes widen in amazement. The kitten sits down opposite him. The boy looks at it attentively. The cat's eyes sparkle. The child carefully extends his hand to it. Suddenly, the kitten comes closer and sniffs her. The next moment, the animal puts its head under the man's hand. Seju blushes with affection. Smiling, he strokes the kitten. The animal wags its tail affectionately. Lying on the desk, the boy opens his eyes when someone calls out to him sharply. All his classmates stare at him. The teacher asks if the boy really fell asleep in his class. The student raises his eyebrows in confusion. The teacher gives him a displeased look and says he's tried to accept the boy's unusual behavior, but he slept through all of his classes yesterday and today. Seju looks up and asks if classes are over already. The man says the school bell just rang. His mouth hanging open, the teacher looks at the student and asks him worriedly if everything's okay and to tell them if he has any problems. Looking out the window, the boy realizes classes are over. Jumping up from his desk, the boy shouts he has to go immediately. The shocked teacher and his classmates watch him go. The man silently looks at the slammed door. The boy runs down the hallway despite the teacher shouting his name. He grabs the straps of his backpack, thinking Caden is probably already waiting for him at home. Seju almost runs into a man as he rounds the corner. The stranger brushes against his shoulder. Grabbing his hand, the boy asks if everything's okay. The random passerby turns out to be Wheon. Looking at him, the young man apologizes and says he's in a hurry. The high school student silently passes by. The boy looks after him in surprise. Scratching his cheek, he assumes this could be the student who was transferred to his class. Waving his hand, Seju apologizes again and runs on. Wheon walks down the corridor. The psychokinetic student looks down. Feeling the vibration, he's holding a phone in his hand. Someone asks where his friend is. The boy puts the phone to his ear and says he's at school now. The students gather in the schoolyard. The stranger asks what his colleague is doing at school when they have so much work, especially since going to school is bad for the study of psychokinesis. The young man stands by the window. The old man says they have bloodhounds on their tail, and at such a time, you can't just show up in crowded places. Looking down, Wheon apologizes. The man asks him to return to the shelter immediately after hanging up. The guy looks out the window. School children are leaving the building in small groups. The psychokinetic student adjusts his glasses. After that, the young man walks further down the corridor. The sun's rays illuminate the residential building. A gray cat is lying on the couch. Suddenly, he opens his eyes. The animal abruptly raises his head. The stray cats look at him questioningly. One of them raises his tail and makes a sound. The gray cat recoils in fear when they try to touch him. He bares his fangs angrily. The stray cat's eyes widen in amazement. They immediately run to another part of the room. The fur on the gray cat's back stands on end. The animal immediately begins to scratch the couch. The other cats tremble in horror. The gray cat walks towards them, arching his back. Suddenly, he jumps into the air. Crack! Caden hits him on the head. The stray cats watch their hero. The gray cat falls onto the couch. His eyes turn white from the impact. Frowning, the awakened one declares no one will dare to behave like that in his house. The alley cats happily raise their paws. They rub against their savior, who calls them too annoying. Caden frowns in annoyance. Peeking out from behind the door, Seju announces his return home. The stray cats happily run to greet him. The boy squats down to pet them and asks if everything was okay in his absence. The ginger cat watches them from the carpet. Picking up the animals in his arms, the boy asks if his friend has been able to eat during his absence. Seeing how the awakened one turns away in displeasure, the boy explains one must eat cat food even if he doesn't like it. Seeing the empty cans behind the cat, Seju decides this is a good sign. He shouldn't worry. The street cats jump off him and run away. Getting to his feet, the boy expresses his concern that the rescued animal never woke up. Suddenly, everything turned out to be much more serious than one could think. The young man pities the cat who never regained consciousness. Caden narrows his eyes. Looking away, he says the cat recently woke up. The boy, opening his mouth in surprise, asks when this happened. The awakened one answers very recently. Looking down, the schoolboy is happy about this news. It seemed to him the animal might never wake up. Closing his eyes, Seju feels relieved the rescued cat is waking up, albeit briefly. Frowning, Caden expresses that his friend is the owner of the other cats. The boy confirms they live on the street. Looking around, the awakened one asks why there's so much cat food in the house if these animals don't really have a home. The boy says his friend would be disappointed in him if he heard the answer. Looking around, the red cat asks permission to decide for himself. The boy smiles and leaves. Immediately after that, he looks away silently. The tabby cat turns around. The schoolboy says as a child, he had no friends because of his ability. His family had to move often, and he himself had to keep his distance from other children because his ability could manifest suddenly. Because of this, he was overcome by a feeling of loneliness. The black cat looks at his fellow sitting surrounded by animals. Seju explains this is why his first friend was a street cat who was always nearby. The tabby cat lies on his shoulder. The boy tells him his friend disappeared without a trace, and then they had to move again. There was no time to search. Since then, he decided to always give the street cats as much love as possible. The gray cat is lying on the couch. The boy bought food, treats, and toys. He wanted to take care of these cats, even if he couldn't take care of all the animals in the world. Smiling widely, the schoolboy asks if his story sounds stupid. Caden looks around silently. Looking away, the awakened one confirms it. The story sounds like some kind of trifle. Stretching his arms up, Seju expresses a desire to sleep due to extreme fatigue. The red cat says there's nothing surprising in this. His friend used the ability without any preparation and didn't rest properly. Leaning on the back of the couch, the boy asks if this is really the reason for his fatigue. Falling to the floor, he stretches again and decides to take a nap. Caden turns away but is suddenly called. The awakened one looks at his friend and asks what he needs. The young man expresses his joy that the cat is still here. Smiling, the boy asks him to promise he'll stay here until he feels better. Caden looks at him from under his brows. Turning away, the ginger cat asks his friend to just sleep. Closing his eyes, the schoolboy wishes him good night. Jumping onto the sofa, the awakened one looks back. Seju falls asleep surrounded by his pets.